The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a dull, bruised purple as we trudged through the crumbling ruins of the old world. The silence pressed in on us like a heavy fog, the only sound coming from our footsteps kicking up the dust of forgotten streets. We hadn't seen a soul, living or dead, in hours, and it was that eerie stillness that had us all on edge. Marcus was leading the group, rifle slung over his shoulder, the weight of the last few weeks etched into his face. His usual cocky swagger had been stripped away by the endless scavenging runs. We were all tired, thirsty, and dangerously low on supplies. "There's a warehouse just up ahead," Marcus muttered, pointing toward the hulking shape of a building just visible through the haze of dust. "Might find something useful in there." I nodded, but a knot of unease twisted in my gut. Something about the place felt wrong, but we didn't have the luxury of being picky. We needed food, water, anything to keep going. We moved in, keeping our eyes sharp for any signs of the infected, or worse, the ravenous circling above. As we approached the warehouse, I felt the air shift, cold and unnatural. My skin prickled. Something wasn't right. I glanced up just in time to see a shadow flash across the sky, too fast to be anything but a ravenous. "Get inside!" I shouted, grabbing Laura's arm and pulling her toward the heavy metal doors of the warehouse. Marcus was already there, prying the door open with a grunt. The rest of the group hurried in after us, just as the screech of wings echoed overhead. We slammed the door shut, the noise inside the warehouse deafening after the silence of the outside world. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my back against the cool metal, trying to calm my breathing. Outside, the ravenous screeched again, its wings beating against the building as it circled above, searching for us. "We need to find supplies and get the hell out of here," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Split up, but stay close. We don't know how long we have." We searched the place for what felt like hours, the dim light casting long shadows over the rusted shelves and broken crates. The warehouse had been stripped bare long before we got there, but Marcus insisted on checking every corner. We found a few cans of food, but it wasn't enough to keep us going for more than a couple of days. The ravenous screeched outside again, its patience running thin. That's when it happened. Marcus was walking toward the back of the warehouse when the floor beneath him gave way. It happened so fast. 1 second he was there, the next, he was swallowed by the darkness, the sound of collapsing wood and metal echoing through the space. "Marcus!" I shouted, running toward the edge of the hole that had opened up. The others rushed over, but all we could see was blackness. My heart raced as I peered into the darkness below, praying he was okay. "Shit!" Laura muttered, her face pale. "Is he—" "Marcus!" I shouted again, my voice breaking. There was no answer. Only silence. For a few heartbeats we stood there, frozen in shock. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise from the hole, a wet, gurgling moan. My stomach turned as the noise grew louder, more grotesque, like something was clawing its way up from the depths. Suddenly, Marcus's hand shot up from the darkness, clawing at the edge of the hole. His fingers were bloody, skin hanging from them in shreds. I reached out instinctively, grabbing his arm to pull him up. But the moment our hands connected, I knew something was wrong. His skin was cold. Not the cold of shock or fear, but the cold of death. His grip was unnaturally strong, and when his face appeared in the dim light, I recoiled in horror. Marcus wasn't Marcus anymore. His eyes were gone, replaced by empty glowing sockets. His skin, pale and gray, was stretched tight over his bones, his mouth twisted into a grotesque snarl. He let out a guttural growl, pulling himself out of the hole with a strength that shouldn't have been possible. What I didn't know then, but understand now, was that the air in that warehouse, the tainted water leaking through the old pipes, the decaying bodies we didn't see, it was all poison. And Marcus, when he hit the ground below, breathed it in. Infected by something darker, something worse than the standard infected we'd fought off before. The toxins weren't enough to turn him into one of the shambling zombies we knew how to kill. They twisted him, morphed him into something else. A revenant, driven by memories of who he once was, but now only consumed by one thing: violence. "Back up!" I shouted, yanking my hand free from his grasp. The others stumbled away, weapons drawn, but no one moved. We were frozen, too shocked to act. Marcus, or whatever he had become, stood there, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with unnatural force. Blood dripped from his mouth, staining the front of his tattered shirt. His eyes, those empty, glowing sockets, locked onto me. Then he lunged. I barely had time to raise my machete before he was on me, his hands clawing at my chest, nails tearing through fabric and flesh. Pain exploded across my body as I staggered back, swinging my blade wildly. I caught him across the arm, but it barely slowed him down. He moved faster than anything I'd ever seen. Faster than the infected, faster than the ravenous. His strength was unreal. He knocked me to the ground, his teeth snapping inches from my face, his breath hot and rancid. I screamed, trying to push him off, but he was too strong. "Help!" I shouted, my voice breaking, but the others were too shocked to move. Laura snapped out of it first. She ran forward, grabbing a piece of metal from the wreckage and slamming it into Marcus's side. He howled, the sound inhuman, but he didn't stop. It took another blow, this time to his head, before he finally let go of me, stumbling back into the shadows. We didn't waste any time. I scrambled to my feet, blood dripping from the deep gashes in my chest, and we ran. We didn't look back. But as we burst through the doors of the warehouse, I heard it. His footsteps behind us, slow and steady. And I knew, without a doubt, that he was coming for us. We ran blindly into the night, hearts pounding in our chests, the sound of Marcus's distorted growls echoing behind us. My chest burned with each breath, the gashes from his claws still oozing blood, but I couldn't stop. None of us could. The image of his glowing, empty eyes and twisted, snarling face haunted every step, pushing us harder, faster. The warehouse was behind us, but the memory of what we'd seen clung to the air like smoke. Revenants weren't like the infected. They were something worse. They retained memories, instincts, like they knew exactly who we were, knew how to hurt us. It was as if Marcus remembered every one of us, and now he was coming to destroy the people he once fought beside. "Where do we go?" Laura gasped, her breath ragged as she ran beside me, eyes wide with terror. "He's not going to stop. He's tracking us," Finn stammered from behind, nearly tripping over the rubble strewn across the road. "We have to keep moving," I shouted back. The truth was, I didn't know where we could go. The wall was too far, and there was no way in hell we'd make it back before Marcus caught up. But if we stayed out here, if we tried to fight him, we'd end up just like him. Or worse. We had to think. Fast. In the distance, I could see the ruins of an old factory, half collapsed but still standing tall against the backdrop of the wasteland. It was our best shot. "Head for the factory!" I yelled, pointing toward the crumbling silhouette. Laura's face twisted in fear, but she nodded, and we made a hard turn, racing toward the building. Behind us, Marcus's footsteps grew louder, faster, his growls reverberating in the night. He was closing in. We reached the factory just as Marcus appeared at the edge of the horizon, his twisted silhouette lit by the dying light. His movements were erratic, jerking, but he was fast, too fast for something that should be dead. We scrambled into the building, slamming the rusted door shut behind us, our breaths coming in shallow, ragged gasps. For a moment, we were safe. The heavy metal door groaned under the pressure of Marcus's body slamming into it, but it held. For now. "He's going to tear through that," Laura panted, her eyes wild. "He's not stopping." I wiped the blood from my chest, the wounds burning like fire. "We need a plan. Fast." The factory was a maze of broken machinery, rusted pipes, and dark, shadowy corners. The smell of oil and rot hung thick in the air, and in the dim light, I could see the remains of other scavengers who had met their end here. Bones scattered in the corners, half covered in dust. Whatever hope I had left was slipping away. Suddenly, the door buckled under another heavy blow, the metal creaking ominously. Marcus was relentless, his growls growing louder as he pounded against the door. My heart raced. If that door gave way, there was no telling what he would do to us. "Check the back," I ordered, pointing toward the far end of the factory. "We need to find something, anything, to use against him." Finn and Laura darted into the shadows, searching for weapons, while I stayed near the door, pressing my ear against the cold metal. Each slam sent vibrations through the rusted steel, the door warping under the force of Marcus's inhuman strength. I could hear his raspy breaths, his nails scraping against the metal like nails on a chalkboard. He was waiting, calculating. "We've got some old piping back here," Finn shouted, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Might slow him down." I grabbed one of the pipes, feeling its weight in my hand. It was old, rusted, but heavy enough to do some damage. If we could even get close enough to land a hit. My hands shook as I gripped the pipe tighter. Marcus wasn't like the infected. He was faster, smarter, he knew us. And that made him more dangerous than anything we'd faced before. Suddenly, there was a deafening crash as the door gave way, crumpling inward like it was made of tin. Marcus stormed in, his eyes burning with a fiery glow, his mouth twisted into that same grotesque snarl. His skin, gray and decayed, pulled taut over his bones, making him look like some nightmarish creature from hell. His fingers twitched, clawed and sharp, ready to tear into us like he had before. "Get ready," I shouted, raising the pipe as Marcus charged. The first blow hit hard. He swung at me, faster than I could react, his hand smashing into my side with enough force to knock the wind out of me. Pain shot through my body as I stumbled back, gasping for breath. I swung the pipe wildly, but Marcus dodged it with ease. His eyes locked on mine, filled with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. He wasn't just trying to kill us, he was playing with us. Laura came at him from the side, swinging her own pipe with all her strength. It connected with his head, a dull, sickening thunk echoing through the room. Marcus staggered, his head jerking to the side, but it wasn't enough. He turned, grabbed Laura by the arm, and flung her across the room like she weighed nothing. She crashed into a pile of debris, groaning in pain. "Laura!" I screamed, but there was no time to help her. Marcus was on me again, his hands reaching for my throat, squeezing the life out of me with terrifying strength. I gasped, the world going dark around the edges, my vision blurring as I struggled against him. But then Finn, out of nowhere, brought down a metal beam with all his might, smashing it into Marcus's back. There was a sickening crack, and Marcus roared, releasing his grip on me just long enough for me to catch my breath. I stumbled backward, coughing, clutching my throat. "Hit him again!" I yelled, but Marcus was already recovering, his movements jerky but unstoppable. His eyes locked onto Finn now, his teeth bared in a snarl. And then I realized we weren't going to stop him. Not like this. The only way to stop Marcus, to end this nightmare, was to burn him. But we had no fire, no way to ignite the factory's decaying remains. "Finn!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. "We need to burn him. It's the only way." Finn's eyes widened in understanding. But before he could respond, Marcus lunged at him, slamming him into the ground with bone-shattering force. The sound of Finn's body hitting the concrete echoed through the factory, the crack of bones breaking sharp and final. He didn't scream. His body simply folded under the force of Marcus's attack, limbs bending at unnatural angles. My breath caught in my throat as I watched Finn's mangled body crumple, blood pooling beneath him. Marcus, no. The thing that used to be Marcus stood over Finn's lifeless body, his twisted, decaying face a mask of pure malice. His glowing, empty eyes locked onto me again, and I felt the familiar surge of panic rising in my chest. My hands shook, my grip tightening on the rusted pipe, but I knew it was useless. "Laura!" I screamed, my voice hoarse from the dust and blood. She was still slumped against the far wall, clutching her side, her face twisted in pain. "Get up! We need fire, now!" I scrambled to my feet, stumbling toward her, my mind racing. There had to be something in this godforsaken factory we could use to ignite the fire. Oil, gas, anything that could spark and burn long enough to turn Marcus to ash. The Revenant didn't waste any time. With an animalistic growl, Marcus tore his gaze from Finn's broken body and charged at me, his movements a blur of rage and speed. I barely had time to raise the pipe before he was on me, his claws slashing through the air. Pain exploded in my shoulder as he raked his nails across my skin, cutting deep into muscle. I cried out, staggering back, blood soaking through my jacket. "Move, Sonny, now!" Laura shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. I didn't need to be told twice. I ducked under Marcus's next swipe, narrowly avoiding the claws aimed at my throat, and darted toward the back of the factory where Laura had spotted a stack of old oil drums. The stench of fuel hit me immediately, strong and acrid, clinging to the air. It was perfect. "Get him over here!" I yelled, yanking one of the drums free, the metal scraping against the floor with a loud screech. The sound seemed to agitate Marcus even more, his growls growing louder as he turned his attention back to me. I had seconds to act. Laura, clutching her side, managed to stagger toward a pile of debris and pulled free a length of frayed electrical wire. The sparking end was exposed, dangerous and unstable, but exactly what we needed. Get ready, I shouted, my heart pounding in my ears. When I say, light it up. Marcus lunged at me again, but this time, I was ready. I rolled to the side, grabbing one of the oil drums and tipping it over just as Marcus reached me. The thick, black liquid spilled out, splashing across the floor, soaking the ground beneath him. He snarled, clawing at me with fury, but I was already moving, already dousing the area with as much oil as I could. Now! I screamed. She didn't hesitate. With a grunt of pain, she jammed the exposed wire into the oil-soaked ground, and the reaction was instantaneous. Sparks erupted from the wire, igniting the oil in a burst of flames. The fire roared to life, flames licking up Marcus's legs, crawling over his body like a hungry animal. For a moment, Marcus just stood there, his head tilted back, his mouth open in a silent scream as the fire consumed him. His flesh sizzled and cracked, the stench of burning meat filling the air, thick and nauseating. But still, he didn't fall. His eyes, glowing brighter now, locked onto mine, filled with an unbearable hatred. He took a step forward, his body engulfed in flames, his skin peeling away in sheets of charred flesh. I stumbled back, unable to tear my gaze away from the horror unfolding before me. How was he still moving? How could anything survive that? Then, with a final, ear-splitting roar, Marcus collapsed. His body hit the ground, twitching violently as the fire consumed him, turning what was left of his decayed form into ash. The flames roared higher, fueled by the oil and debris, casting long shadows across the factory walls. It was over. I collapsed onto the ground, my chest heaving, the adrenaline finally fading from my veins. My shoulder throbbed with pain, but I was alive. Laura limped over to me, her face pale and streaked with blood, but there was relief in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered, sinking to the floor beside me. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. My mind was a fog of pain and exhaustion, but one thought cut through the haze. We made a mistake. A deadly one. We hadn't burned him when he died, and we had paid the price. I pulled out a scrap of paper from my jacket, my hands shaking as I scrawled down the words, "Burn the dead, because if you don't, they come back. And they come back stronger, more vicious, and with one purpose: to destroy those they once knew."